Recording in progress.
All right. Good afternoon and welcome to this press conference with Minister Anand. Bon après-midi et bienvenue à cette conférence de presse avec la ministre Anand. Nous allons prendre les questions dès la fin de son allocution. S'il vous plaît, utilisez la fonction main levée. If you have a question, please use the raise hand function. As usual, one question, one follow-up. Minister, please go ahead.
Merci beaucoup. As Arctic nations, Canada and the Nordic countries share a deep commitment to multilateral cooperation and international law. I'm in Helsinki for the Nordic 5 meeting with Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and Iceland, deepening our economic, security, and regional cooperation with Nordic states is a core pillar of Canada's Arctic foreign policy, and we will be focusing on shared priorities and goals. En tant que pays arctique, le Canada et les pays nordiques partagent un fort engagement envers la coopération multilatérale et le droit international. Je suis ici à Helsinki pour la rencontre des 5 pays nordiques avec la Finlande, la Suède, la Norvège, le Danemark et l'Islande. On va concentrer sur les priorités que nous partageons ensemble. Donc, merci beaucoup et je pourrai recevoir vos questions maintenant.
Merci. First question, Dylan Robertson. Please go ahead.
Hi, Minister. Thanks for taking our questions, and please excuse if my voice cracks. I'd like to ask about the Ottawa Treaty. We have anti-landmine advocates who say that the government should be doing more to convince Finland, Ukraine, and other countries to not pull out of the Ottawa Treaty. I'm wondering if this is part of the talks that you're having with your Nordic counterparts.
So at a high level, Dylan, we will be focusing on 3 key priorities: improving the security across the Arctic and supporting Ukraine, engaging in global advocacy, including by strengthening the multilateral system and enhancing Nordic cooperation through concrete means. The convention, the Ottawa Convention, is one of the most successful disarmament treaties, and I will be urging countries to remain in the 1997 treaty. And this will likely come up during our meetings, although it is not specifically mentioned in the priorities that I just outlined for you.
Thank you. And obviously, we're all curious about the Zelensky meeting that is unfolding in Washington still. And I understand that you're speaking with President Stubb tomorrow when he gets back from the White House. I'm wondering what questions are in your mind right now as we head into this White House discussions. And do you know whether Prime Minister Carney was invited to the White House alongside our European peers?
I am very much looking forward to meeting with President Stubb. We're going to be discussing Canada-Finland cooperation, including economic and Arctic security collaboration. Of course, he is very well versed on Canada's long-standing position that Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty must at all times be respected, and that Ukraine itself must be the country that decides its sovereign future. That's what is required by international law and the international rules-based order. That is what is required by the concept of territorial integrity. And so that is Canada's position, and there's no ambiguity on that front about this.
Thank you. Prochaine question, Inès Lombardo. La parole est à vous.
Merci. Bonjour Madame la Ministre, Inès Lombardo de Franco Presse. J'aurais d'abord ma première question va porter sur la lettre que votre collègue Monsieur Nate Erskine-Smith vous a envoyée. Je pense que c'était au courant de cette fin de semaine. Elle s'intitule, je vais le dire en anglais, je m'excuse, My letter to Minister Anand, Israel genocide in Gaza. So my first question is, did you already read this letter?
Bien sûr, j'ai reçu la lettre pendant le week-end et notre position est claire et nous continuons de travailler sur les questions clés avant la rencontre des Nations Unies. Premièrement, il faut revenir à un cessez-le-feu à Gaza. Tous les otages doivent être libérés. Le Hamas n'a pas de place à Gaza. Les souffrances humaines dans la région sont intolérables et plus d'aide humanitaire, surtout de la nourriture, doit entrer à Gaza. Donc, aussi, nous avons l'intention de reconnaître l'État de Palestine et sa décision reflète notre conviction de longue date que la sécurité des Israéliens et des Palestiniens ne peut être garantie que par une solution à deux États.
Parfait. Puis j'ai ma deuxième question, c'est je vais vous lire en anglais et en français un extrait très précis de sa lettre. Donc, Monsieur Escron-Smith dit to address the immediate crisis in front of us, I am now convinced that a multilateral peacekeeping force is necessary established either via UN Resolution 377A or outside UN process, et permettez-moi de le faire en français. Pour faire face à la crise immédiate qui se présente à nous, je suis désormais convaincue qu'une force multilatérale de maintien de la paix est nécessaire, qu'elle soit mise en place par le biais de la résolution 377A de l'ONU ou en dehors des processus onusiens. Est-ce que vous allez mettre en place, faire participer le Canada à une force éventuelle multilatérale pour stabiliser, pour arrêter ce qui se passe à Gaza en ce moment?
Merci pour cette question aussi. Je voudrais mentionner que le personnel des forces armées canadiennes a livré une aide humanitaire supplémentaire vitale à Gaza déjà afin de répondre aux besoins humanitaires urgents des Palestiniens. Ça, c'est clair et nous continuons de travailler sur l'aide humanitaire avec d'autres pays, mais ça, c'est une priorité pour nous et pour moi comme ministre. Ces mesures exceptionnelles ont été prises en collaboration avec notre partenaire et surtout la Jordanie, car l'accès à l'aide humanitaire à Gaza est fortement restreint. Et les besoins humanitaires ont atteint un niveau sans précédent. Cette obstruction de l'aide humanitaire constitue une violation du droit international humanitaire et doit cesser immédiatement. Le Canada retire ses appels en faveur de la garantie d'un accès sûr et sans entrave pour les organisations humanitaires. Et aussi, peut-être, je pourrais ajouter que j'ai parlé souvent avec mes homologues David Lamy et aussi Jean-Noël Barrot. Et nous pensons ensemble que la situation maintenant est inacceptable. Et ça, c'est la raison pour laquelle nous avons déjà confirmé et signé les déclarations pour l'aide humanitaire nécessaire en Gaza.
Merci. Next question, Mike Blanchfield, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Minister. Thanks for taking the time with us today. You mentioned Canada's position on Ukraine a moment ago and the need to respect international borders. What's your sense of, if that doesn't happen here with the current conflict, what are the implications for the Arctic and for Arctic nations, including Canada, which are sort of on the front line of with Russia in this region?
Well, Mike, I'm really glad that you asked such a pertinent question, given that I'm here in Helsinki to meet with the Nordic Five to discuss, amongst other issues, this very issue. And Canada, as you know, is an Arctic country. 40% of our territory and 70% of our coastline is Arctic facing. So given the shifting geopolitical landscape, given the security threats, given the issues relating to climate change, there is a pragmatic need to have this conversation with the Nordic Five in order to ensure that we are working together in the interests of Arctic security. For Canada, you have seen that this is a priority for this government. Prime Minister Carney announcing over the Horizon radar system immediately after becoming Prime Minister, $6 billion. Even before that, when I was Minister of National Defense, I announced almost $40 billion for NORAD modernization. What these projects mean, including the move towards 5% of GDP in NATO spending, is that we are going to be investing significantly in the Arctic, in resources in the Arctic, whether we're talking about ports or airports or runways, that is going to be in conjunction with Indigenous peoples. And that is one of the reasons why I appointed an Arctic ambassador, Virginia Mearns, recently, in order to ensure that we have that liaison with Canada's, all of Canada's peoples, and certainly as a separate peoples, the Indigenous peoples of Canada.
What role do you see for these allies in helping Canada secure its Arctic, and also sort of a joint role for Canada sort of in a NATO Arctic posture?
Again, this is a very important and pertinent question, if I may. Like, if you go back to the founding principles of NATO, deterrence and defense, crisis prevention and management, cooperative security, the way in which NATO countries have discharged that mandate has been primarily to look eastward, to look at the territory of Europe. And one of the ways in which Canada has contributed to that mission is to set up the brigade in Latvia, where we, I'm sure you're aware, have many other countries participating under this broad umbrella of Canada's leadership. What I believed strongly when I was Minister of National Defense, and what I continue to believe as Foreign Affairs Minister, is that NATO's gaze also has to shift westward and north because of the changing geopolitical landscape, especially following February 24th, 2022. We are seeing increased activity, for example, in the Northwest Passage. We are seeing Russian infrastructure move further and further north on the other side of the Arctic Circle. So our priority in terms of Canada's Arctic foreign policy is to ensure that we leave no stone unturned to protect and defend Canada's sovereignty, especially in the Arctic. That's the reason why we have supported our Arctic foreign policy with $73 billion over 20 years to bolster our presence in the Arctic year-round, and to do that in conjunction with Indigenous peoples so that they can share in the economic benefits. And if I could just make one further point, which is conceptual but important, and that is, in previous years, it used to be the case that from a policy standpoint, one would separate out projects that were focused on the economy and projects that were focused on defense and security. Well, thinking in those silos is no longer appropriate because Canada's economic security is tied deeply to our sovereignty overall, and indeed protecting and defending our very country. And so when we talk about critical minerals in the north, yes, that's an economic question, but it's also a defense and security question, and it is embedded in our foreign policy, and certainly is one of the reasons that I want to be at the table today and tomorrow with the Arctic Foreign, with the other Nordic 5 ministers.
Prochaine question, Juliane Lapointe, la parole est à vous.
Bonjour, est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Oui, bien sûr.
OK, parfait. J'aimerais vous demander, quand on regarde la place qui est accordée aujourd'hui à la Maison-Blanche, à Zelensky, ou quand on va regarder ça, comparativement à la place que Donald Trump a donnée à Vladimir Poutine vendredi, est-ce que vous considérez que Donald Trump a accordé trop d'importance à un criminel de guerre? Est-ce qu'il y a un possible déséquilibre ici?
Premièrement, je pense que c'est positif que le président Zelensky et d'autres homologues en Europe sont là à Washington maintenant pour la conversation nécessaire. Qu'est-ce qui va passer avec les négociations? Et notre position est sûre que l'Ukraine doit être à table quand on discute leur territoire. Le leadership du président Trump et des États-Unis maintenant crée l'occasion de mettre fin à la guerre illégale de la Russie en Ukraine. En même temps, l'Ukraine doit être à table. Et ça, c'est la raison pour laquelle je pense que c'est positif que le président Zelensky est là à Washington pour souligner la nécessité de respecter l'intégrité territoriale de l'Ukraine.
Juliane, aviez-vous une question de suivi?
Oui, désolée, je réactive le son. Est-ce que vous croyez donc qu'il doit y avoir un cessez-le-feu avant toute forme de négociation entre l'Ukraine et la Russie?
Je pense que c'est positif d'avoir une conversation maintenant parce que tout le monde veut avoir, ou j'espère que tout le monde veut avoir un cessez-le-feu aussitôt que possible. Donc, d'avoir la conversation nécessaire avec le président Zelensky maintenant est important et on doit continuer d'avoir le dialogue nécessaire. Et aussi, ce n'est pas seulement une question de cesser le feu, c'est aussi une question de quelles garanties de sécurité solide vont être sur la table parce que les garanties sont essentielles pour une paix juste et durable. Et le Canada coordonne étroitement avec le président Zelensky et nos partenaires de la coalition des volontaires pour intensifier notre soutien constant à l'Ukraine et notre engagement. Et depuis 2022, par exemple, le Canada déjà a souligné à peu près 22 milliards de dollars pour l'appui pour l'Ukraine. Donc, nous sommes ici pour l'Ukraine et c'était le cas depuis plusieurs années, surtout depuis 2022.
Next question, Rafi Boudjikanian. Please go ahead.
Hi, thanks very much. Minister Anand, on Ukraine, can I ask you what clear assurances have you received from the USA that Ukraine's territorial integrity will be respected in any peace talks?
So, as the Foreign Affairs Minister for our country, Canada, I have been in close conversation with my counterpart in Ukraine, Minister Sibia, to underline our commitment to Ukraine's territorial integrity, and that is a resolute commitment that Canada has had in the face of Russia's brutal war of aggression. Decisions regarding the future of Ukraine belong to Ukrainians alone. That's Canada's position. And the work that we will do on the international stage, and I will do as minister, will be to ensure that my counterparts around the world are aware of Canada's position and to build the bridge necessary to ensure that other countries also view international law, territorial integrity, the rules-based international order as fundamental institutions that must be protected and respected. As Prime Minister Carney has said, we need to enable Ukraine to defend its territorial integrity and sovereignty, and that is why Canada has put on the table more than $22 billion in multifaceted forms of support.
Okay, thanks. I do have a follow-up. I mean, you didn't really mention the U.S. in that question, so I take it you have not received assurances from them. But nevertheless, you spoke of territorial integrity, and you have condemned Israel, saying that they want to control parts of Gaza City. You have repeatedly suggested you might enact more sanctions against them since May. But you have not done that after sanctioning 2 cabinet ministers. Why haven't you enacted further ones? Are you feeling pressure from the U.S. to not do that?
The importance of this issue and Canada's position must be emphasized. Israel should abide by international humanitarian law. Hamas must lay down its weapons and release the hostages and play no role in the future governance of Gaza. The escalation will not end the humanitarian horror in Gaza. And we, as a country committed to humanitarian aid, will continue to be at the forefront of all forms of humanitarian aid possible. That is why we are at about the 3rd highest bilateral donor of humanitarian aid. We are resolute in our commitment to do whatever we can to address the humanitarian horror in Gaza and the deepening suffering of both the Israeli hostages and Palestinian civilians. Having said that, your question about continued action on the part of Canada, I would like to stress that we, in addition to the work that you laid out in your question, we did take the decision on July 30th to explicitly state our intention to recognize the state of Palestine. And that reflects our long-standing belief that the security of Israelis and Palestinians can only be guaranteed through a 2-state solution. So when you say that there is more to be done, yes, there is more to be done, given the suffering and the humanitarian horror. Canada is taking steps to ensure that the 2-state solution as a policy outcome will be preserved. And in order for that to happen, we're not only putting forward our intention to recognize, we are also ensuring that we have that continuing dialogue with the UK, with France, with Australia, and other like-minded countries to support the recognition of the state of Palestine. For example, on Friday, I convened a meeting of Jean-Noël Barrot and David Lanny to discuss how we together can ensure that the Palestinian Authority is living up to its commitments that were contained in the letter from President Abbas to Prime Minister Carney and to President Macron. There's a reason why the recognition did not occur on July 30th. We need this time to ensure that the work is being done to get to recognition. And that's the work that we're doing right now.
Next question, Judy Trin, please go ahead.
Minister, can you please give us an answer in regards to Canada's stance on whether or not Ukraine should be allowed to join NATO? President Trump has said, as a condition of a peace deal, that Ukraine should give up its pursuit of joining NATO. Where does Canada stand on that issue at this moment?
So the work that we're doing and I'm doing is to ensure that Ukraine has the support it needs across multiple lines of support, be it economic, financial, humanitarian, military. The further work that we will do internationally is to support Ukraine in its own decision-making. And I want to stress that that requires emphasizing Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity in every conversation, including this one. The Ukrainian people, the Ukrainian government, President Zelensky, will make their own decisions about their future, whether it relates to the negotiations that they are involved with in Washington, whether it relates to their joining multilateral organizations, whether it relates to their participation in other institutions. Those are decisions for Ukraine. What Canada will do is support Ukraine's decision-making. We will be there with support as we have been, and certainly when I was Minister of National Defense, I led the first tranche of the military support that we provided to Ukraine. But our position remains behind Ukraine. And that's where I'll leave this answer. Thank you.
When Canada said that it would recognize a Palestinian state, Donald Trump tied it to the trade talks and tariffs. Is there pressure right now from the Americans about possibly coming on side to where President Trump stands and asking Canada to stand with the U.S. in regards to asking Ukraine to stop its pursuit of NATO membership in order to further a peace deal? Is that pressure being felt by the Canadians when it comes to the Americans right now?
So my direct counterpart is Secretary Rubio. And Secretary Rubio and I have had positive and ongoing conversation about multiple international issues, including the Middle East, including Haiti, including Ukraine. The work that we're doing together is to ensure that the dialogue between our two countries along multiple issues remains open and strong. And thus far, we have had this very strong relationship. On tariffs, we remain focused on getting the best deal for Canadian workers and businesses, and those negotiations are being led by the minister whose responsibility is with this effort, Dominic LeBlanc. My job as foreign minister is working with my counterpart, Secretary Rubio, as I have stated.
And we'll take one last question.
I'm so sorry, Sarah. I think that's all the time we have for today.
Thank you.
Thank you. This concludes